The CRF300L is a heck of a bargain in 2022. This bike's only a little over $5,000 on the showroom floor. This version with ABS only was a bit over $6,000 out the door. It's pretty crazy. A budget motorcycle, you're gonna expect it to have a few shortcomings, but for the most part, none of them would really stop you from enjoying the bike. It's a heck of a deal. It's mostly all pretty good, except for one thing. And that, of course, is the suspension. If you have a CRF300L, you already know about this, but if you're looking into getting one of these, you should be aware that the suspension is a bit soft, undersprung, underdampened, yeah. And it is enough so that it does keep me from praising this bike on the mountaintops and telling everyone to go get it. On top of just being way too soft, there's really no adjustability outside of a little bit of preload in the rear. Wouldn't necessarily be so bad, I guess, if it was just sprung and set up right to begin with. You know, they build these things in Thailand, and it seems like in the Asian market, it's not that big a deal, but it really would have been smart for Honda to add on their assembly line, like a European, American, some different suspension settings would have been very well appreciated. And it is to the point that it can, to some degree, stop you from enjoying it as much as you should be able to. The rear shock is pretty immediately noticeably bad the minute you sit on it. The minute you take it off kickstand, you'll even notice it. But that fork is not much better either. When you start to push even just a little bit quick off-road, it's not an enduro style bike, it's not a 450L, but you shouldn't have to cruise at 15 miles an hour off-road either. Once you pick the pace up just a little bit, that front fork is very, very soft. It doesn't get any better too if you have it in supermoto trim like the bike is sitting in right now. When the suspension's just that soft, there's a very disconnected feeling with the front end. What's it doing? How much grip does it have? And it's also kept me from installing these things. If you've been following this project from the beginning, you know we said we were gonna do a whole collage of different things: adventure riding, dual sporting, supermotoing, and some enduro stuff. These are non-DOT tires. I've got these, some rim locks over there, and heavy duty tubes. Not gonna do that until I get the suspension done. So in order to accomplish this, I sent out an email to Race Tech and asked them if they'd be willing to work with me on this project, and they were. If you're unaware of Race Tech, well, they're huge. They're like the biggest aftermarket motorcycle suspension company in America and probably the world. They also have a full kit to fix our CRF. Let's see it. Let's see what we got. For the front forks, we have a spring kit and some gold valley. You notice there's only one spring in here. This is kind of an interesting thing with this bike, and you'll see more when we dig into this, but one of the forks does not have a spring in it. It's just for dampening, and the other one has a spring and no dampening in it. Kind of a silly setup, but their kit basically puts a spring in the side that didn't have one. We're also going to install our Race Tech Gold Valve kit. This is something we'll have to sort of assemble and put together, and it's going to affect the dampening on the motorcycle. But that's going to be in the next video because that is pretty involved on its own. This video, we're going to work on this. The stock shock is a non-serviceable shock, so there was only so much that could be done with that, which is why we have a full-on replacement shock, the G3-S custom. I sent them in though all my specifications. This is something when you order a shock like this, they'll ask you to fill out a form. Same thing with the gold valve, about how you're riding the bike, how much you weigh, blah, blah, blah. Different things they want to know. So this is custom tailored to me. We got high speed, low speed, compression dampening, rebound, preload, all the good stuff. This is going to be a major upgrade, and it's also a bit of a pricey upgrade, to be fair. I think this thing is retailed around $1,100 or so. But before you freak out, let me explain. Race Tech has sent me the best of the best to show off their products. This often happens when we do these build videos. You reach out to a company and we're always happy to have them work with us, and we're happy to get the really good stuff. But this is them always wanting to show their best foot. You know, they say, hey, if you're gonna show something off, show off the best of what we have. And that's what we have here. There are other options. I'm not telling you all have to go buy an $1,100 shock from Race Tech. I believe there's also an $800 ranged one, which is still gonna be way better than the stock and still would be custom ordered to you for what you need. As well as you can replace the spring in your shock. That is very possible and would be, again, a huge upgrade over the stock. If you go on their website, you'll find a whole list and chart of things where you plug in rider weights and different that. You look at those and it'll tell you what you should run. I think under 200 for a spring like that. We've got some cool power mods coming for this thing. Not just a regular old exhaust and a tune. No, we're actually gonna do some cool stuff to this thing that may be potentially increasing the power of this bike by like 40% or so. But I'm more excited about this than anything else. If you've never had a bike with custom suspension set up for you, I highly recommend it. So I've got the bike up on my fancy lift. If you're interested in having a cheap lift that only gets the bike a few inches off the ground, which is actually where I normally like it, sure, go check out that video. I have removed my skid plate because it does get in the way of the rear linkage, which would be a problem for us. We'll need to undo some of these linkage bolts in here. If this is not sliding out easily, you need to pick up on the rear wheel or jack the bike up a little bit more. But with that, now we just need to unbolt the shock. And I think we'll be able to swing this thing out of here. throw a block under it, I give myself a little bit more room back here to pull the shock out. We're moving to the top, we can see there's a bolt right here and a nut on the opposite side. Put my hand here, I'm gonna grab the shock and kind of push up a little bit just to take the weight off of the bolt. Now I should be able to just pull it. All right. I love there's like no lubrication on these bolts. I always put a little bit of lubrication on these things, but that's all right. It's okay, because look, doesn't matter. We got it out. New versus old. You can always compress this spring down and then take this apart and change the spring out. Racetech has a really big line of springs for you. But speaking of other options, I do think it would be worth mentioning the fact that there are a lot of cheaper shocks out there. But I'll tell you why I personally wouldn't have picked to go with them. There's a reason I reached out to Racetech and not whatever tech or Thai brand. One, this shock is completely set up for me, where those other ones, I don't know how much they do that. But the biggest problem I have with these sort of other brand name shocks that come overseas, how serviceable is that thing really? For instance, the ones that come from Thailand, I looked into those just to see, hey, what's the deal? They are, the price, here's the funny, the price is only a little bit cheaper than the Racetech ones. They're actually not crazy cheaper. In fact, I think the top level one that would be equivalent to this is about the same price. Try to look up parts for that shock. Try to look up broken down details. Try to look up a place to send that shock off to if it ever needs to be rebuilt. You're essentially replacing your non-serviceable shock with another non-serviceable shock. That's crap. Let's pop the new one in. When we go to stick this back in, we do have to consider the reservoir. I've actually stuck the envelope thing back around it so I don't scratch it up as I try to work this through the frame of the bike. But yeah, we do need to sort of manipulate this and work it into position as it goes up. It actually sits right here by the side of the engine, and we have to replace this bolt with a little bit longer of a bolt. I'm gonna remove this bracket that's on here. I'm also gonna try to remove this sprocket guard down here and see if there's enough room to pop through this joint right here. Then I can work it up to where it needs to go. Before I stick all the bolts back in, I'm gonna wipe them all off. Actually, all came out super clean. And I'm going to add a little bit of old thick grease on them, at least on the smooth part of it, known as the shank area. Steel bolt sitting in a steel collar. Won't hurt to have that in there. Washer and the nut. You want to make sure it's still got a little bit of movement in there, like we're not pinching the two together. Oh, that looks fancy. By the way, I guess I should mention to you guys, I have cut this thing up. It was packing with mud every time I went anywhere near the dirt. And the only aftermarket one I can find is like a Zeta one, and I think it'll fit this one, but I can't tell for sure if it's got the case saver in there. And yeah, I know this is a little bit goofy looking, but you know, this was also free with a Dremel. That looks kind of fancy on there, don't it? Oh, look at me, king in the castle, king in the castle. I knew the shock would be really easy. That's why I kind of wanted to save it for the first video, because the next one's a little more involved. We do have to pull the forks apart, but I will guide you through that detailedly. This was so simple though. The only real thing left to do to this is to, well, the little adjusters should all be set. I'll double check that. They did send some settings related to me. But the only other major thing that we need to set is the sag. That's where we adjust the preload on the rear spring and make sure it all sits proper as it should. But there's no point in doing that until we do the front forks, because that's just gonna throw it all back off. I will take it off the stand here and I'll sit on it and see if it did what it did before, which was just sink about halfway down. Oh! Yes! I'm so dumb, but look at that. It doesn't sink anymore. That's a pretty long balance there, wasn't it? Hey, B-Rat over here. I'm very tempted to go take this thing out for a spin and see how it rides. But without the front forks done as well, it's gonna be, I mean, it would still be better, but we need to get the whole thing balanced. Big thanks to Racetech. Be sure to check those guys out. There's been a big leap in the right direction. Now I just need to do the other half. If you enjoy these videos, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you to like and subscribe and do all that. I mean, that would be nice, but it would be really good if you really wanna help support this channel. Go over and check out the Patreon. where we have exclusive versions of these videos that come out earlier and they're ad-free, censor-free. You can go to our Patreon Discord page and call me dirty mean names and I'll listen to you. I'm very active in there. We have voice chat in there. We're a fun group. Don't be shy, jump in there, say what's up. You get it for $1 a month and it does help support these videos. It's why you're seeing these videos. the front's still a joke, I mean. Oh man.